Title: The Architecture of Stagnation. I have always been a man of rigid, suffocating routine. My life was defined by the steady, rhythmic ticking of a clock and the predictable geometric order of my workspace. I was a freelance archival auditor, a high-level, solitary job that requires one to stare at spreadsheets, digital ledgers, and architectural blueprints for 12 hours a day. It is a quiet life, a hollow life, but it was mine, and it was safe. I lived in the safety of numbers. Columns and rows are honest. They do not hide intentions. They do not lie. Or so I believed, until the day I found the anomaly. It started with a project I had been contracted to audit, a massive, sprawling residential development on the edge of the city, bankrolled by a holding company that seemed to have no physical headquarters. The blueprints were architectural masterworks, complex, layered, and supposedly perfect. But as I scrolled through the digital files at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, I saw a discrepancy that defied all logic. There was a space, a room. It appeared on the 5th floor of the north wing in the technical schematics, but it had no door, no ventilation shaft, no windows. It was just a hollow, empty square in the geometric center of a block of luxury apartments. I assumed it was a design error, a software artifact from a corrupted render. I sent an email to the lead architect, attaching a screenshot of the impossible void. The reply I received a week later was strange. It did not address the room. It did not offer a technical explanation. It simply said, "Some spaces are meant to remain unobserved. Please focus your audit on the plumbing schematics and do not query the internal void again." That was the first red flag. But curiosity, like a crack in a foundation, is a dangerous thing. It grows, and eventually it tears the structure apart. I began to obsess over the void. I spent my nights not working, but calculating. If the building was constructed as these plans indicated, that room did not exist in our physical dimension. I became convinced that the blueprints were not just maps of a building, but a ritualistic geometric design meant to trap something within the walls. I went to the building site that weekend. It was an unfinished concrete skeleton, looming against the gray sky like a gargantuan, jagged tombstone. The site was abandoned, locked behind heavy, rusted chain-link fences. But I am a man of persistence, born of my boring, lonely existence. I found a gap in the perimeter and slipped inside. The 5th floor was dead silent. The air tasted of ancient dust, wet concrete, and cold limestone. I navigated the hallway, counting the doors, checking the numbers against the digital blueprints I had saved on my tablet. 401, 402, 403, 404. And then, where there should have been a wall, there was nothing. Well, not nothing. There was a section of the wall that looked thin. If I stared at it long enough, it seemed to vibrate, like heat haze on an asphalt road in the middle of summer. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing the cool, rough concrete. It did not feel like stone. It felt like soft, yielding velvet, warm to the touch. I pulled my hand back, heart hammering against my ribs. I turned my flashlight toward the ceiling, looking for a way to climb over. But the light flickered and died. In the sudden, absolute darkness, I heard it. It was not a sound from the hallway. It was a sound from behind the wall. A rhythmic, wet thumping. The sound of a massive, tired heart beating against the other side of the partition. I did not stay. I ran, as if the darkness itself were clawing at my heels. I stumbled through the construction debris, my breath coming in ragged gasps that echoed too loudly in the hollow structure. Every shadow seemed to stretch toward me, reaching for my limbs. I felt an overwhelming sense of violation, as if by finding the room, I had committed a grave cosmic trespass. I reached my car, locked the doors, and drove until the skyline of the city was just a distant, flickering smear of light. I did not stop until I reached my apartment, but the safety of my home felt stripped away. I sat in the dark, clutching my tablet, wondering what terrible thing I had just awakened. The safety of my home was a lie. I sat in the dark for hours, clutching my tablet, trying to rationalize the rhythmic heartbeat I had heard. It was just the wind, I told myself, or settling pipes. But the fear had burrowed into my subconscious. When I finally opened my laptop to delete the project files, the screen flashed a brilliant, blinding white. A single line of text appeared, written in a font that looked like it had been carved into the pixel grid. You noticed. You were not supposed to notice. The text remained there for hours. I could not highlight it. I could not close the window. I tried to force a reboot, but the machine hummed with a life of its own. The next few days were a blur of deep, suffocating paranoia. I covered my windows with heavy curtains. I stayed in the center of my rooms, avoiding the corners. I kept the lights on, but the light did not feel like it belonged to the sun anymore. It felt artificial, thin, like a paper veil stretched over an infinite abyss. I started seeing them, the rooms. They were not just in the blueprints anymore. I saw them in the pattern of the tiles in my kitchen. I saw them in the spacing of the books on my shelf. I saw them in the way the shadows gathered in the corners of my bedroom. Every time I looked away, a space would open up, an empty geometric void where reality simply stopped existing. The world was leaking. I tried to go back to work, but my spreadsheets were ruined. Every cell that contained a number began to pulse with that same rhythmic, wet heartbeat. I could hear it coming from my computer speakers, even when the device was completely unplugged. I realized then that the audit was not just a job. It was an invitation. By looking at the plans, I had given the void permission to look back at me. I began to lose track of time. Is it morning? Is it night? The light in my apartment stays at a dull, miserable twilight, regardless of the time. I stopped eating. The food in my fridge developed patterns, mold that grew in the exact geometric shape of the room on the 5th floor. I watched as the walls of my own living room began to stretch. The angles grew sharper. The ceiling seemed to retreat into a distance that should not exist in a standard apartment. I am being rewritten. The structure of my home is becoming a mirror to that building site. I have tried to leave, but every door leads back to the same hallway, the same 401, 402, 403, 404. I am trapped in a repeating loop of architecture. I hear them talking now. Not people, the building itself. It has a voice that sounds like grinding stone and tearing metal. It tells me that the void is lonely. It tells me that I am the missing piece of the floor plan. I am the architect of my own cage. I tried to burn the blueprints, but the paper would not catch fire. It only turned into cold, wet dust that seemed to absorb the light around it. The air in my apartment has grown thick, heavy with the scent of ozone and stagnant water. I can feel the house breathing around me, its joints creaking in sympathy with the heartbeat that now seems to pulse from the very foundations of the earth. I have begun to mark the days by scratching lines into the floor, but the lines shift when I am not looking, rearranging themselves into new, more complex patterns. The logic of my reality is failing. Gravity feels subjective. Sometimes I feel as though I am walking on the ceiling, looking down at my own shivering form huddled on the floor. I tried to call a friend, but the phone emitted only the sound of static and that rhythmic, wet thumping. I am utterly alone in a space that is no longer my own. Every time I look at a mirror, I see not my reflection, but the bare concrete walls of that 5th floor, waiting for me. I am the audit, and the audit is coming to its final, terrible conclusion. I can feel the presence behind me, the cold, sharp geometry of the entity that was birthed from the blueprints. It is waiting for me to lose my sanity so it can claim the final empty square. The entity arrived on the fourth night, not through the door, but by folding space. It appeared as a distortion in the air, a ripple in the fabric of my living room, like a stone dropped into a dark, oily pool of ink. It was tall, impossibly thin, and shaped like a human figure made entirely of disconnected floating lines and sharp, hostile angles. It had no face, only a vertical slit that pulsed in time with that same wet, rhythmic thumping I had heard at the building site. It stood there for hours. It did not speak. It did not move. It just occupied the space. Whenever I looked at it directly, it would blur, flickering out of existence. But the moment I turned my head, I could feel its weight, a cold pressure against my skin. It was hunting me, not with teeth or claws, but by reclaiming the space I occupied. It began to erase the objects in my room. My chair vanished, replaced by a jagged hole in the air. My bookshelf followed. The entity was cleaning the area, removing the clutter of my life so that only the void could remain. It wanted to turn my home into an empty square on a blueprint. I realized then that it was not a creature. It was an error in the architecture of the world, a structural failure of reality, and it was hungry for order. It wanted to fill the empty spaces. It wanted to fill me. I tried to fight back, swinging a heavy lamp at the distortion, but the lamp passed through it as if it were nothing more than smoke. The entity began to lean toward me. The vertical slit on its face opened wider, revealing a darkness that went on forever, a vacuum that smelled of ozone and deep, stagnant water. I felt my skin start to stretch, pulled toward it by a magnetic force that defied physics. My limbs felt elongated, my joints popping as I was forced into a geometric pose. It was correcting me. It was making me part of the design. I screamed, but no sound came out. The room had swallowed the sound, storing it in the walls. I am becoming a coordinate, a data point in a ledger I can no longer read. The entity is closer now. It is so cold. The cold is a living thing, crawling into my marrow, freezing my thoughts into hard, crystalline shapes. It is showing me the truth. The world is not built on atoms or energy, but on empty space that we have merely painted over. And the paint is peeling. I am watching my own hand disappear, turning into a set of perfectly straight white lines, floating in the dark. It is not pain, but a terrifying sense of precision. I am being measured. I am being indexed. The entity reaches out a finger, a line of pure absolute darkness, and touches my forehead. The touch is the coldest thing I have ever known. It wipes away my memories of the sun, of warmth, of laughter. It replaces them with the cold, silent logic of the void. I see the blueprint now, not as a paper document, but as a living tapestry of light and dark, weaving itself into the very fabric of my soul. The apartment is dissolving. The floorboards are pulling away, revealing a dark, infinite grid below. I am standing on the edge of nothingness, and I am starting to find it beautiful. The entity moves closer, its pulse syncing with my own failing heart. We are one, the observer and the observed, the void and the vessel. I feel the final resistance within me snap, a string breaking in a grand, discordant symphony. I am no longer fighting. I am simply observing my own deletion. The room is so quiet now, filled only with the sound of the blueprint being rewritten. I have not slept in what feels like an eternity. I am writing this on a notepad, by hand, because the digital screens are no longer safe. They have become gateways. I can see the entity in the hallway now, staring through the gap in the doorway. I can hear the wallpaper peeling back as it moves through the walls. It is coming for the room. It is coming for the empty space inside my chest. I know what happens when it reaches me. I will be flattened. I will be rendered into a flat, two-dimensional schematic, a permanent entry in a ledger that will never be audited again. If you find this, please, for the love of all that is holy, do not look for the room. Do not look for the blueprints. Do not try to understand the design. Some things are not meant to be audited. Some things are meant to stay empty. I was arrogant to think I could look behind the curtain. The universe is a fragile, poorly constructed building, held together by our refusal to look at the gaps in the framing. But now I see the gaps everywhere. The air is full of them. The ground is full of them. I am looking at the wall, and it is starting to pulse again. It is opening. It is a door that leads to nowhere and everywhere all at once. The entity is standing directly behind me now. I can feel the sharpness of its lines against my back. It is waiting for me to finish this sentence. It needs me to document the completion of the audit. I am the final entry. The total sum of the building's cost. Everything is settling into place. The geometry is perfect. The alignment is absolute. The thumping has stopped because the heartbeat is now my own. I can see the grid now, etched into the surface of my own eyes. I am no longer a person. I am a section of the blueprint. I am the room without a door. I am the silence in the walls. Goodbye. Do not look for me in the files. Do not look for me in the schematics. And if you ever find yourself looking at a space that should not exist, a room with no door, turn your head. Do not stare, for if you stare long enough, the architecture will look back, and it will find you wanting. The void is opening. The lines are meeting. Everything is quiet. Everything is perfect. The final column has been filled. The audit is complete. I am finally part of the structure. I am home. The concrete is cold and welcoming. The lines are so clean, so beautifully, terrifyingly precise. There is no more doubt, no more confusion, only the plan. The great eternal plan that stretches across the stars. I see the world as it truly is. A vast, unfinished architecture, waiting for someone to fill the gaps. And I am the first to truly understand the beauty of the design. I lay down on the floor, and the floor rises to meet me, folding itself around my limbs like a shroud of stone and ink. The walls are closing in, but they are not crushing me. They are refining me. I am being pressed into the blueprint, becoming a permanent part of the foundation. I feel my identity slipping away, replaced by the rigid, unchanging laws of geometry. I am the north wing. I am the fifth floor. I am the room that cannot be observed. The darkness is not a lack of light, but a presence of pure structure. It is absolute. It is final. It is the end of the audit. And as my consciousness fades into the grid, I realize that I was never meant to be an auditor. I was always meant to be the evidence. The process is complete. The void is filled. I am part of the architecture forever. The light of the sun is a distant memory, replaced by the soft, cold glow of the schematic lines. I am finished. I am done. I am part of the blueprint. I am. I am. I am. The room is no longer empty. The room is me. And finally, the house is complete.